In this video, I'm going to go through the fundamentals of multimedia content design for your courses. And I'm going to focus on course videos. So assuming that you want to make something like what you're watching right now, which is a recorded PowerPoint lecture. So very quickly, we've talked about cognitive load theory as it applies to the design of your Moodle course, but I also want to quickly review that because it really applies to any multimedia content that you're designing for students. So as you remember, cognitive load theory is a model of memory that has three components: intrinsic, germane, and extraneous load. Intrinsic load is how complicated something is, and this is related to the subject under study. Germane load is the amount of relevant cognitive activity that students will need to expend in order to do the activities that you're asking them to do to learn the content. So that's the good cognitive load. That's what we want to see. And extraneous load is anything else. So any cognitive energy that students are expending that isn't directly investing in their learning. So for example, if they cannot find the file that they need to complete an assignment on the Moodle page because things are disorganized on the Moodle page, that is extraneous cognitive load. Students shouldn't be spending their cognitive energy figuring out how the course works. Cognitive load theory directly informs the cognitive theory of multimedia learning, which sounds like a lot, but it's pretty simple. So in this theory of multimedia learning, we need to know that working memory has two main channels where people process and acquire information. Those channels are visual or pictorial. So right now you are looking at words on the screen and you're viewing an image. And then auditory and verbal. So you're also listening to my voice. So you can think about that as the two main channels that multimedia learning products typically activate. So why is this important? Each channel has limited capacity, right? You can only listen to so many things at one time, and you can only see so many images at one time. But in order for learning to really take place with multimedia, it's important that both channels are maximized. So images and verbal communication together is going to be more effective for learning than just one or just the other. So thinking about how to maximize both of these strategies is going to be best for the multimedia content that you create for your students. Let's get into the best practices, and these all come from research into how students learn with multimedia. So for example, how students learn with and from videos. Signaling is the first concept we'll talk about. So we use signaling to highlight important information. Even having that word signaling bold on my slide is a way to signal. It's me showing you what I want you to pay attention to. You could put keywords on the screen for important elements. You can also use color and contrast to emphasize the organization of information and relationships. So there's a lot of features in PowerPoint that you could use to highlight that. And then think about your Moodle course or what other materials you have that might be out of the video where you could explain things like the purpose of the video, the context for the videos, what students need to do next with the video. And you can use Moodle tools for that to give that structure and context and signal what the fundamental purpose of your video is for your students. Segmenting is crucial. Segmenting means chunking information for your students. Your videos should be as short as you possibly can make them. There isn't a number. I can't give you a number of minutes. You could look in your own field and see if there's any best practices in the field or in your discipline, but the general rule is that they should be as short as possible, ideally under 15 minutes and even shorter than that, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So think about chunking a long PowerPoint presentation out into several smaller presentations that you could then narrate for your students. You could include chapters. You can link to chapters in a YouTube video. You could also have clicking forward questions within videos using a tool like H5P in Moodle. And what's really crucial to this is the pre-planning work that you do. So instead of opening up a PowerPoint a PowerPoint presentation that you've been delivering in class for 50 minutes for a couple of years, think about looking at that PowerPoint presentation and how you can segment that, chunk it out to create some smaller videos that lead to exploring a whole concept for your students. Weeding is so important to eliminating extraneous information, and this goes back to wanting to always reduce extraneous cognitive load for our students. Examples of this include no music in your videos unless it's crucial, unless you're teaching a music class or for some reason it's important to you communicating your message to your students. But think about the audio processing channel and try to keep it as streamlined and simple as possible for your students so that they hear your voice and not a lot of distracting background audio. Same goes for images and visuals. Don't use complex backgrounds. Try to keep your images pretty straightforward, not confusing. Maybe one complex image on a slide, not many. And you want to make sure that your audio and your visuals match up, so that whatever someone is seeing on their screen as they're listening, that you're talking about that thing. I know that seems simple, but it's really important. And this is one of the reasons I like to use PowerPoint to structure this, because it's very easy for me to be looking at my own slides as I'm narrating and making sure that what is on the screen matches up with what you're hearing. A script seems like it might take more time, but I promise you in the end it will save you time. I have re-recorded this slide 6 times already because I didn't follow my own advice and write a script for this. I have a pretty good outline, but that's another reason to really consider a script or a good outline, because it will save you time in needing to stop and re-record your content. It's a really good idea to preview the video for the learner and to give them context. So a lot of times this happens in Moodle, where you might want to have text that accompanies your video that talks about what learning outcome or what activity the video supports. You can also think about starting your video talking about what learning outcomes the video supports and giving context for how this video relates to other components of the course. At the start of your video, it's usually a good thing to clearly state what the student will learn by watching that video and being very clear about the purpose. You want to provide easy access to your video, and we can do that by things like clearly and consistently labeling the videos. So naming conventions are very important. Here's an example. You can include the video time with the title. But if we have a video called the Moodle Gradebook Overview, I can then put the time there, and then I'm going to consistently use that same naming convention for every video in my class so that students begin to understand that what they're seeing is a video, they don't need to think about it. So that is reducing that extraneous cognitive load for them. You definitely want to have all of your videos in one place, which hopefully is going to be Moodle, since that's your virtual classroom, it's your living syllabus, it's where you're structuring all other learning experiences in your online and hybrid course. So make sure that your videos all exist in a place where students know how to go and find them. You don't want to send the videos out in emails that the students then need to track sort of all over the place. And again, just make sure that the content, whatever context you're providing around the video, is well organized and easy to navigate. Let's talk about some best practices for student engagement, because there's nothing worse than creating a video that students don't watch. These take a lot of time, a lot of energy, and there's some tips I can give you to inform your video creation process that will result in increased student engagement with those videos. So use a conversational language. Address your students directly. You is a good word to use when addressing the viewer, and then I is a good word to use when talking about yourself and your experiences. So don't be afraid of that, to have some conversational language, because that helps students feel a sense of connection with you, with their instructor. And helps them feel engaged, because this is a form of communication. It might be one way one-way transmission for communication, but it is an important form of communication that you have in your course. Try to speak relatively quickly and with enthusiasm. You can let me know how well I've succeeded at that. I'm trying to convey my interest and enthusiasm in the topic, but of course this is always within what you're comfortable with and your personality and your presentation style. Guiding questions can be a great way to begin a video and to help students sort of focus their cognitive energy and effort in on what the video's central purpose is. And then interactive questions can help to keep students watching. So if I'm going to ask students a question, before showing them the answer, I should ask them that question and even like pause for maybe a moment. You don't want to pause too long, but you do want to ask students questions as you go through, because that helps people when they're watching a video to stay engaged and pay attention. So what do you think is on the next slide? It's a question. Maybe it engaged you, maybe not. It's not a great question, but I'm sure that in your course, when you're actually delivering that content to students, you should think about what kind of questions you could ask to keep students engaged in the material, to keep kind of checking in with them and making sure that they're following the central concepts, even though, again, this is a one-way form of communication. But think about those types of interactive questions that you might bring into a classroom. We've talked about accessibility elsewhere, but briefly, we'll talk about accessibility for the course multimedia that all videos should be captioned, and those are videos that you're sharing in your course that you did not create, and then of course videos that you create. We recommend using YouTube to upload your things like course videos, narrated PowerPoint lectures, because YouTube will auto caption those videos and you can then go in and edit the captions for accuracy. It's also a really good idea to provide a written transcript if possible. You can download your captions from the YouTube video. And then of course, if you have written the script ahead of time, that makes a great transcript to share as a companion to your video for your students. And this is really crucial for students who English might not be their first language, and it benefits them to be reading along with closed captioning. It's of course good for students who have any sort of hearing impairment or hearing differences. It's good for parents who have young children and are doing their schoolwork late at night and would rather read along with the captions, or maybe are listening at a very low volume. So it's really better for all learners to have your video captioned. Contrast should always have a really high contrast between text and then the background. So I have a white background and black text, which provides optimal contrast. You can see my bad example of having a light yellow text on a white background and how painful that is to read if you're even able to read that text at all. And then finally, your fonts. Sans serif fonts are best, but my tips are basically don't use fancy fonts. So I gave you another poor example. That font is hard to read. Just use simple, basic fonts. Don't get fancy with that, because again, it's best for all students if things are kept as simple as possible. I know that was a lot, and so I want to just leave you with these very final thoughts. Make sure the multimedia content in your course is well planned. I promise you that having a good outline, or really thinking through or writing a script about what it is you want to say and how you want to say it ahead of time, is going to save you from doing many, many, many takes when it comes to actually recording that multimedia content. Be as brief as possible. I know I've said this many times, but it's really crucial. Students are more likely to engage in multimedia content if it's short. And I know that with this video, I'm not modeling that very well. So it's going to be important for me when I upload this to YouTube to include links, chapter links, so that you can jump around to the video to watch the pieces that you would like to review in the future. Keep that multimedia as simple as possible. Remember that you always want to reduce extraneous cognitive load and really, really capitalize on making sure that students are able to engage with the auditory and visual processing channels. Make sure that you are directly telling students what the purpose of your video is and how it relates to the course content and activities. By relating the multimedia you create to what students are actually doing in the course, that is the most important way you can make sure that they watch the video. So reference your video in the discussion forum, or have a very short, low stakes quiz after the video so that students can check their understanding of the video's concepts and content. And then finally, always make sure that the content you create is accessible to all learners. And if you have any questions about what we've talked about here or anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're at moodlehelp@berkshirecc.edu.